emotionally overloaded and overwhelmed, then this is the show for you. Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium, and also goes out on blogtalkradio.com/Lilydale. I'm part of the Lilydale radio family, and there are shows throughout the week that you can tune into with various hosts and various topics. And on my show, I focus on spiritual topics relating to spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, or more. And I am delighted to have on my show today, Dr. Brenda Hawkins. Hello, Brenda.
Hi, Willa.
So good to have you back on the show. This is wonderful that we'll be able to really help people today with some of the techniques that you're going to be sharing. Before we get into that, I want to make sure everybody knows, again, you can look at this on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. You can also look at the archived videos of past shows, and Brenda has been a guest before. We've talked about various psychological things and spiritual things, and it's been really wonderful for her to share her insights. You can also find those on my YouTube channel. So if you look up Willa White on YouTube, you'll find me there. And this also goes out on the Lilydale Assembly Facebook page. So I want to introduce officially Dr. Brenda Hawkins. Brenda is a retired psychologist and a registered Lilydale medium currently. So we're grateful to have her here in our community. She's a wonderful font of information. And today we'll be focusing on managing emotional overwhelm. And that's something that at different points in our lives, we all hit up against, we all have the experience of. And sometimes we really need some techniques that are going to lead us past those big moments, those kind of breaks within us, shall we say. So Brenda, let's talk to them about emotional overwhelm.
Thanks, Willa. And it's great to be here on this wonderful sunny Wednesday morning. Yeah. Yeah, I've really been looking forward to talking about dealing with emotions and emotional overwhelm, understanding it and how to work with it, because it's always good to have tools. And one thing about feelings is that when we're growing up, we're taught how to do all sorts of things, how to ride a bike, tie our shoes, reading, writing, but we're never taught about feelings. How to recognize them, how to label them, what to do when feelings come up. Okay. And so we grow up not understanding our own feelings, not to mention the feelings of the people around us. And it can also impact on our spiritual lives too, our feelings that we have towards the Great Spirit, the God of our own understanding, whatever we're wanting to call it. Okay, because we do have feelings towards that source also. And so it does have a major impact on us. And typically, because we have trouble identifying our feelings and knowing when they're beginning to develop in us, since we don't have any way to work with them, they stay unresolved. Okay, it's kind of like chores that we don't do around the house. They just tend to pile up and pile up. Okay, and because they do pile up, sometimes they bubble out or come out in ways that are really unhelpful, inappropriate, destructive, and we can get frustrated with that because we're trying to communicate what's going on with us to people we care about, and it may not land the way we're wanting it to. And another thing that makes it difficult too is we start to feel afraid of our feelings because we get all of these messages in our society about feelings like, big boys don't cry, big girls don't cry. And sometimes parents will say to their kids, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about. So we get all of these messages about feelings being bad, and by extension, there's something wrong with us because we're having feelings. And So we still sit with these feelings. We either shove them down until they burst out, or we just go ahead and kind of dump them on whoever's around. Okay.
Mhm.
And so we wind up feeling depressed, anxious. We have all these fears that come bubbling up, anger outbursts. In fact, in the news recently, there have even been stories of airplanes having to turn around in mid-flight because passengers are having difficulty managing their feelings appropriately. So, needless to say, there's a lot of stigma around emotions, around feelings, from the time we're little, when we get all of these messages. In fact, I was even thinking back in the 1950s, there was a song titled Big Girls Don't Cry. If you remember that one, if you've ever heard it. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, very powerful messages. And so we wind up feeling like if we feel something, it's not okay. And we get afraid of those feelings too. So we get layers and layers and layers. It piles up.
Right, because in a social context, it's like, well, your feelings are inconvenient to us at this moment. So there's having to deal with whatever the community or tribe or family or the person you're with is like, I'm not ready for that, can't deal with that, not gonna give space for that. So then people get very frustrated. And like you said, they do tend to clam up and it starts to build in them. It starts all of the repression. And I will punt that back to you as far as the big girls don't cry thing. Then we have all of these songs that are in the vernacular of how, I'm going to run the world. Like, what do they call them? Like torch songs or something like that, where they just sort of get into that I am woman, hear me roar energy. These boots are made for walking, all those kinds of things that seem to stem from wanting to be in a power mode.
Right, right. Yeah. It reminds me too of this real popular song that's been out in recent years, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, where it
Oh,
says,
yeah.
love is not a victory march, it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah, which
Yeah.
is a very deep, heartfelt anguish kind of feeling. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it resonates so much with a lot of people, and even on TV. And as a number of people know, I tend to be a bit of a science fiction nerd. And I think the reason why the characters of Mr. Spock and Data the android on Star Trek are so popular, and also Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory, is these three characters are trying to feel their way through emotions, trying to figure out what emotions are, how to recognize them, and how to work with them.
Right, because emotions don't compute.
Right, they don't compute. Yes,
Yeah.
it's like we need our logic, we need our critical thinking, analysis, and we also need our emotions too. And so I think that's why those characters really resonate so much with a lot of people, because we're all trying to feel our way through this thing of feelings.
And
And
some people wish they didn't have feelings. They wish they could be at that level of not having feelings.
exactly, there was even a character on one Star Trek episode where there was a little boy who had lost both of his parents. And of course, the sorrow was real big, especially for a little kid. When we're little kids, we're not really prepared to lose our parents. Of course, it's never easy at any age. And so he starts to emulate himself after Data, because Data always seems to be very much in control. And nothing unforeseen happens with Data. He recognizes what's going on and he plans things out, always in control. Whereas this little boy is feeling very out of control. He misses his mom and dad. Now, as I'm talking about feelings, I'm realizing too that I'm talking about feelings that people perceive as being negative. Okay. And there are also what we might perceive as being positive feelings too. Okay. Happiness, gladness, excitement. And the thing is, people don't know how to handle those feelings either. When something really big and wonderful happens, it's kind of like, what do I do? What do I do? Okay. And so there's that also. We also need to learn how to handle good feelings, happy feelings. And so as I'm thinking about the positive and the negative feelings, and of course, people do have mixed feelings. It can become like one big stew or soup. Okay. We try to sort out, okay, what are we feeling? You know, what is this feeling about over here, that feeling over there? And also, how do we even get the nerve to even approach these feelings? Because we've gotten all of those negative messages. What I would propose is that we look at feelings as being like the lights on our dashboards of our cars. You know how when there's something going on with our cars, a little light will pop up with an icon.
Sure, the temperature gauge.
Right. Uh-huh.
Like
Or
a
the
check
little
engine.
check engine, which, you know, that could be something as simple as the gas cap is loose. Okay, no big deal, nothing to get upset about. The gas cap is loose. Or it could be, hey, there's something going on with the engine itself. You know, get thee to a mechanic. Okay. So feelings are like that also. It could be a little thing or it could be a big thing, but either way, we need to look at it. So just view emotions as being something that lets us know that there's something going on that we need to take care of, that we need to be aware of and work with.
Mhm.
So that way we can eliminate that fear of feelings. That takes care of one layer. Okay. So by reminding ourselves that it's just kind of like a little light on the dashboard of the car, okay, we start to make it a bit smaller, more manageable. We take away a layer.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, as we start sorting out, okay, what feelings are we feeling? There are four main types of feelings, four main categories. And of course, there's a wide range of feelings that are kind of like different combinations of those categories or different intensities. Okay, as the saying goes, there's mad, sad, flat, and scared.
Right.
Okay, yeah. And so, like I was saying, everything else is a mixture or a difference in intensity. So anyway, just remember that feelings are neither good nor bad, they just are. Now, as we're sorting through the feelings, okay, first thing that we need to become aware of, because we want to recognize what we're feeling while they're still small. The smaller they are, the easier they are to work with. So we may want to be tuned into what our bodies are feeling. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, with all of the emotions, it can be confusing in a way because our bodies react the same way no matter whether we're angry, sad, scared, or happy. Okay. Whether we've received really bad news or we've won the lottery or whatever, what happens is our breathing increases, blood pressure increases, heart rate increases, muscular tension increases. Okay. So the thing is to become first aware of what's happening inside of our bodies and notice where we tend to carry our tension. And that varies from person to person. Some people carry their tension in their jaws because there are muscles there. And if you press your thumbs right in the hinges of your jaws, it may feel a little bit sore. Okay. Because when a muscle is relaxed and you press on it, you won't feel anything. But if you press on it, okay, for some people who carry their stress there, if it can feel a little sore. Some people carry their tension in the back of their necks, okay? And you may want to, if you're one of those folks, you may want to be aware of that, kind of loosen those muscles a bit. Some people carry it in their chests, some in their stomachs, okay, and some in their legs. In fact, we even have that built into our language, okay? We may hear somebody say, well, I have trouble stomaching this particular situation, or I don't have the heart for doing this particular task. Or what so-and-so said leaves a bad taste in my mouth, or someone's a pain in the neck, or a pain in the you know what. Okay. It's all throughout our language. Okay. So our bodies will give us signs before we're even consciously aware that we're having an emotional reaction. So if we're in touch with our bodies first, then it's kind of like an early alert system. I don't want to call it an early warning system because that implies that these things are bad when they aren't.
Mhm.
Feelings aren't good or bad, they just are.
It's a
So,
notification. I would say it's like
yeah.
a notification to
Yeah, it's a
you.
notification. Yeah, just like on our computer keyboards where we get these different notifications. One
Pop
could
up.
be, yeah, it could be, hello, hi, how you doing notification, or happy birthday notification, um, or gee, you need to update your security thing, your security software, or like I got
So,
the other,
so the body awareness would be level 1, right?
level one.
Level 1.
Yeah, yeah. If you're aware of that, then you can become aware, okay, I'm starting to feel something. Okay, let me sort out what this is about.
Mhm.
Okay, because again, those reactions can be for any number of feelings. Okay. And then what we have to do is look at what are the thoughts that we're telling ourselves. First, what is the situation that we're in? And also, what are the thoughts that we're having about it? Okay. And when we're having negative feelings, okay, in quotes, okay, because again, feelings aren't, bad to have. We want to look at the things we're telling ourselves. If we're telling ourselves thoughts that have words like always, never, things like that, should, all the different shoulds or ought tos, those are usually signals that, hey, we're telling ourselves some things that aren't good for us.
So you're saying sweeping generalization statements that are a bit too concrete.
Right, right. Things like you'll hear people say, well, gee, I never get a break. Or so and so is always has an attitude towards me. Or, I shouldn't have said thus and such. I should have said this other thing instead.
Right. There's an amplification in the
Mhm.
language and in the thinking that starts to escalate more of the feelings.
Right, right, exactly. So you want to watch and take a look at what it is that you're telling yourself. In fact, for folks who are in 12-step programs, which there are a number of folks who are involved in some type of 12-step recovery, they call it stinking thinking. You really want to watch what you tell yourself about what's going on. And yes, look at the situation that's happening too. Okay. And in terms of your thinking, check out to see if what you're telling yourself is reality based, if it's objective, or if it's kind of like some old programming that you have, or maybe a misinterpretation.
Right. Old programming, the old patterns of emotions, you can get into the groove. And there's almost I feel comfortable feeling this way because this is how I'm used to feeling about this person or about the situation or similar event. And so there's a kind of a convenience groove that people can get into that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it's almost like that physical response of your body knows how to react in that level when that happens. But like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it does start to behoove us to recognize those patterns.
Right. It sure does. Because then if we don't recognize those old patterns, kind of like old tapes getting reactivated. Okay, what we're doing is we're reacting to something that happened long ago that isn't really happening right now. Okay.
But you know how people say, well, feel your feelings, right? It's okay to feel your feelings. But sometimes those feelings, as much as you try to avoid the idea of negative or positive, sometimes those feelings are not helpful to the circumstance. And yet you rationally cannot stop feeling that way until
Right.
you complete a cycle of the feeling. So
Mhm.
most people are going to want to complete a cycle of feeling, or if that gets interrupted before they're ready, if somebody says calm down before they're ready, it's actually, it like escalates them more. Like
Mhm.
it's like, oh, you didn't just tell me to calm down.
Or they'll internalize it and take it as a negative judgment. Oh, I'm being bad. I'm, feeling this feeling, and it's not okay with so and so.
Mhm.
Am I making a fool of myself? That kind of thing. So it can generate all sorts of self-talk that may not even be relevant to the current situation. I keep thinking of this one client that I had one time, and this was many years ago. Uh, Previous history of abandonment by parents, uh, had difficulty connecting with friends in school because her family moved a lot. And her husband got sent off to Afghanistan. And so those old early feelings, okay, got rehooked. And plus, she was scared to death that something was going to happen to him, that he would never come back, or he would get hurt. She was feeling helpless, scared, angry that he was going. But yeah, who do you get angry at? Okay. So there was that feeling of helplessness too. So I told her about the fight or flight response because she was having all those physiological reactions. And so she decided she would use that in a positive direction by getting into a program of exercise where she would get on the treadmill and walk and run. And that would kind of scratch the itch from that fight or flight thing, because her body would just recognize it as, okay, there's this thing going on. And, we're doing fight or flight, but it's in a productive way. And she wound up getting a lot more energy, more peace of mind, okay, because that helped to alter her chemistry in the brain.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
she felt more at peace. She was able to think more clearly and think, okay, yes, that is a risky situation. And he is very skilled in this. And also, we talked about her spirituality because she brought that up. And so I put the worry that she was having as being kind of like negative prayer, that all of that negative self talk was like negative prayer, and you want to switch it to the positive. So
Right.
she would just remind herself that he's very skilled. He he doesn't take unnecessary risks. Um,
So that's
and
actually a merging of a few different techniques, one being the physical outlet. So
mhm,
when you have emotional energy and, like you said, the surge of things that are happening in the body, it's good to get yourself into a physical outlet mode, such as
right.
exercise, so that you can get your yayas out or whatever, get that done. But also, like you said, addressing the idea of how a person is talking in their own self about what's going on, and about their feelings and about what they're projecting for the future.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Right, right. So instead of feeling exhausted from her worry and thinking, oh, he's going to get hurt, uh, he'll never recover from it, or he's going to get killed, I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to lose my home. What do I do with my kids, raising them all by myself? So, I mean, she could really get herself into a
Sure. And a lot of
we
people
all
have
do.
had those thoughts. They're in that very situation, and they've had those thoughts
Hmm.
about their spouse and about their future and about their family. Absolutely.
Exactly. And that whole issue of the what if self talk. What if this happens? What if that happens? Those are the unanswerable questions that all they do is they feed that anxiousness.
Right.
It's
And
kind of like,
in those moments, all you can do is do your best, and like you said, go into the more affirmative prayer
right,
rather
right.
than negative prayer mode.
Hmm. Right. While at the same time being reality based.
Sure.
Okay. We're not talking about being Pollyanna and denying what we're feeling and thinking. It's just that, okay, I'm having these thoughts, and I don't know that these terrible things are going to happen. I'm just going to stay in the here and now. This is where mindfulness comes in. Okay. Stay in the here and now and stay with what you do know. And that is he's skilled. He knows how to take care of himself. He has a lot of tools to use. He has all these other people around him. Okay. And just
Well,
stay
I think it's important that she recognizes that she has those feelings, that she has someone to tell that to, because if you don't have someone to say, I'm really scared about this, or
Yeah.
I'm really worried about this. I mean, some people are writing into the Facebook on this particular episode, and they're saying, my mom was uncomfortable when I cried. When I was little, I was sent to my room if I was crying. And you feel like they don't care about how you're feeling, let alone understand. And so it was valuable to her to be able to talk to you about this in a safe space. So I would say another technique would be to find someone that you can talk to about those feelings so that you can transmute them into achieving positive outcome beyond it. Because if you just keep cycling through that, sometimes speaking it aloud and getting it out can really purge as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very important point, and that is giving your voice. Some people even talk about taking their voice back or giving voice to what they're feeling, making their voices heard. That's so important for us. So yes, finding a good friend who's a good listener, also finding a good supportive therapist, okay, who feels good to you. Okay, different therapists are different, okay, just like other people are. Okay, so, and one size does not fit all. So find someone that you feel good with, someone that fits, so to speak. Okay, and talk to that person. And therapists can handle any number of feelings. Okay, so it's so important to put your voice to it. And related to that is a feelings journal. Okay, which is different from, say, a meditation journal or anything like that. Okay, a feelings journal functions as a safe container for what you're feeling. You put your emotions, the raw emotions in there. I hate doing thus and such, or thus and such is too overwhelming. Okay, so and so died and I'm feeling devastated. Okay. Or if you're beyond words, even just taking a pen or a crayon and scribbling or drawing pictures, okay, which can be real helpful for also that early programming, going into that kid space when you're just scribbling, okay. But again, the feelings journal, the purpose of it is to be a safe container. You don't show it to anyone. It's just space for you. That's your sacred space where you dump the raw emotions, okay? Because sometimes raw emotions can come up and there's no one around to talk to, okay? Or we can't go out and jog. It may be middle of the night, in an urban environment. It may not be good for us to go out and jog, or it may be blizzarding outside, whatever, okay? So yeah, a journal is always available. Okay.
I think that's a pretty solid technique for people to engage in.
For sure.
So that they can have a place that, whatever they feel is poisonous inside of them, they can get it out. It doesn't have to stay in there, and that it is a safe place.
Right, exactly. It's a safe place. You don't show it to anyone. And I had a client one time that said it was kind of like, what does she say? Like emotional vomiting. That's the way she put it. And she says, and you know how you always feel so much better after you've done it? You really don't want to do it. It really feels bad. But then after you've done it, you feel so much better and you feel relieved. And that's how it was for her. And
so I want to take us on a little tangent, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So in terms of people who, as they were growing up, they felt that their parents, that it traumatized them, that their parents didn't let them share their emotions, and they were told they needed to control themselves and, sit still and be quiet, or don't cry in front of me, or just stop it right now. They wish that someone had held space for them. But to some extent, I was watching a podcast, and someone was saying that no matter what, every parent is going to at some point traumatize their child by saying no to them. Just
Mhm.
having someone say no to you when you want something, oh
Uh,
no, trauma. So it's something that um, I think we have to have a balance between, yes, we have emotions, we have wants, desires that we feel are unfulfilled or misunderstood, but it's how we cope with that
exactly.
matters. So it's not if it's going to happen, it's a when. And at some point we have to say, okay, they weren't able to in that particular moment, maybe they were overwhelmed with what was going on in their life and they couldn't show up for me that way. But everything that I feel my parents or whoever is in my environment doesn't give to me, I have to give to myself. I have to
Mhm.
find that balance within. And that's why I think that you're sharing these techniques will be helpful for people so that they can move more into a positive framework of emotional um, overwhelm control, but to also vent. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, you need to have a way to express your feelings too. Emotions are energy, just like any other energy, and we can make
Mhm,
choices as to how we work with that energy.
mhm.
Okay, we don't want to be putting judgments on it. It's just acknowledging, recognizing, and then making a choice as to what we do with them.
Sure. And we all know somebody in our life that we feel is a bit too emotional or overshares too much or hot. We all know somebody
Uh-huh.
out there in the land that we feel is just a little too soap opera or a little too I'm offended or I'm emotional. What do you say to that? This understanding that someone we can view other people as too emotional, but we don't want that for ourselves.
Right, right. Again, that goes back to eliminating the judgments about feelings.
Mhm.
It's like, yes, if that person is a danger to themselves, okay, you want to be sure that they're safe, okay. But short of that, okay, if somebody tends to um, um, overreact, we would perceive it as being overreacting. Okay, that is their level. Okay, one size does not fit all. We all have different levels that we're comfortable at.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the thing is to take away the judgments about that. Okay, like um, if there's a person who, let's say, overreacts because I get a hangnail, and it's the end of the world. Okay.
Oh, it's so the end of the world.
Yeah, and we've all known people like that. Okay, and well, that's that person's thing. We don't have to fix that. We all understand what it's like to be in pain, okay, or to feel helpless or aggravated or whatever it is that person is feeling. But we don't have to take their emotions on as our own. Okay, we can be present to someone else's emotions and not take them, not get enmeshed in them.
Mhm.
Kind of
Because
like,
some of the emotional overwhelm that people feel is because they're having to deal with other people's emotions.
right, and feeling like you have to fix it.
Mhm.
And oftentimes we don't have to fix it. Oftentimes when we're uh, expressing emotions, we just need for someone to hear it and acknowledge it. And that's true. I'm thinking now of people who are going through the shock and grief of losing someone important to them has died, and it may be expected, unexpected, uh, act of nature, or something arbitrary, unfair, whatever. Okay, it's still a loss, and that person needs to cry, they need to scream, they need to talk, whatever it is. Okay, and all you have to do is just be present. Being present and just being in that caring space does a lot. You cannot fix the death, okay, and you can't take away the grief, okay. Grieving is healthy. We need to do that when we lose someone or something. Okay. But just having the presence, again, we go back to mindfulness, being mindful of what's going on with that person, recognizing that those are their feelings, and you don't have to fix it, just be present. And in fact, the more comfortable we are with our own feelings, the more comfortable we can be with other people's feelings. Okay. I want to address fear too. I want to be sure we don't run out of time.
Yeah, we've got time to do that. And for those of you who may just be joining us, today we're talking about managing emotional overwhelm. And my guest today is Dr. Brenda Hawkins, who is a retired psychologist and currently a registered Lilydale medium. And we're talking about various techniques and ways of handling emotional overwhelm. And it's a very important topic. If any of you want to put a comment into a Facebook post, something that has been overwhelming to you or something that you're wanting to address, feel free to do that. So yes, Brenda, you're talking about, we'll move on to fear.
We'll move on to fear, and then I want to talk about another tool, okay, to help deal with the overwhelm. Okay, a lot of people view fear as being negative, and I've even seen ads for workshops done by lay people in various locations, okay, different parts of the country, where it would say eliminating fear, mastering fear, and it's, living without fear. I even have a book called Fearless Living. I haven't gotten around to looking at that yet, but I'm interested in seeing what the woman has to say. Because it's good to, listen to what people are thinking and talking about. But fear, okay, fear is, again, like another light on the dashboard. Okay, view it as being communication. You want it to be communication. You don't want it to be the boss of you, but you don't want to devalue or invalidate it either. Okay, because fear, when it's based in objective reality, it can help us avoid a certain thing. Okay, be proactive in taking a course of action where we look at, okay, what are some things that could go wrong? And it can be as simple as planning a trip. And because we all know things can go wrong with our cars, okay, we check the air pressure in the tires, we check the oil, the fluids, the belts before we go on a cross-country trip. Okay, that's a good use of fear.
Sure, be prepared, the Scout motto.
Right. Yeah, in fact, that's why students study before a test, hopefully, is because they don't want to flunk the test. So that's a good way of using fear. And I had a colleague one time, and she and I had a real good conversation about fear once, because she was, before she became a therapist, she was the very first female firefighter in her county. This was decades ago. Okay. And so we were talking about fear, and I asked her about, well, gee, how do you get yourself to run into a burning building when we're all hardwired to run away from a fire? Okay, just imagine having to run into a building that's completely on fire, and there may be people in there or pets, and you have to put out the fire anyway. And she said that the scariest thing about going into a fire would be if you have a partner who doesn't feel fear. Someone who doesn't feel fear or acknowledge fear is dangerous to go into a risky situation with, because that person will take unnecessary chances. They can endanger themselves, and then you have to rescue them, or they can endanger you, and then who's going to rescue you? Okay. So yeah, we want to keep fear in perspective. Okay, it can protect us. And then again, there's the unnecessary fear, like, some people have a fear of public speaking. In fact, there's a whole body of research that's gone on for decades where people have ranked when they've ranked things that they can be afraid of, human fears, they rank public speaking at a higher fear level than they do death.
Well, I have to say, I took a public speaking course in college, and my knees were knocking so bad and I was shaking so badly. The teacher said, "It's okay, Willa, you can go ahead and sit down." Like, I'm shaking like, and look at me now. But I do feel that, sometimes we can overcome that which is a fear to us.
Mm-hmm.
If it's public speaking, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't think it's worse than death.
That's wonderful. You've come a long ways. And
I'm not even scared of death.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can see, that's an example right there of how you can take a fear and you can work with it.
Oh, yeah.
Like with public speaking. Okay, you know that nothing bad is going to happen to you while you're speaking.
It sure felt like it.
No, that's what
you sure felt like something bad was going to happen.
Yeah, you had that fight or flight thing going on. We get that from our caveman ancestors. Mm-hmm. And having that fear kept us safe from the saber-toothed tiger. When the saber-toothed tiger would come along, we'd get up from our fire circle and either, fight the tiger or run away. The ones who just sat there got eaten. Okay, so that's why we have that fight or flight mechanism that goes on. So even for some people, when they're kids, standing up and giving a book report in class can feel as scary as that saber-toothed tiger did to the early cave people. Okay, but in reality, there's not that degree of danger in giving.
No, the tiger's way worse, people. It's way worse.
It's way worse. So that's where you learn to work with the fear and you reduce it until it gets to the point where you're not really focusing on it. You're focusing on what it is that you're doing. And if you're focused on what you're doing, again, practicing mindfulness, which is always a good tool to use, okay, you'll get through that task and live to tell the tale.
So what you're suggesting is that if someone goes into fear, not necessarily about public speaking, but about something that's not in terms of absolute survival, but a fear mode that they may be in, they're in the process of this, or needing to go and talk to someone or to get something done, that you're suggesting that the technique would be to, of course, have the body awareness, check the symbols on the dash, but then also self-talk through that, right?
Right.
And then also press forward.
Press forward, be focused on what you're doing, okay? Be focused on the here and now, and also focus on your breathing too, okay? Relax your breathing so that, when we're anxious, we tend to breathe from the upper part of our lungs, okay? And we either breathe fast and shallow or we hold our breath. In which case, we're not getting any oxygen to the brain to do any clear thinking with. Okay, and then cortisol, the stress hormone, goes up to the brain and we get even more scared or more anxious. But if we can reduce our breathing, bring it down to the stomach, to the diaphragm, the way a newborn baby breathes. If you've ever watched a newborn baby when it's sleeping, its little belly will rise and fall. Okay, we want to do that kind of breathing. That's our natural breathing. And that'll help gear everything else down.
And of course, the fear that we're talking about is not about long-term fear or things that are PTSD. I've done shows with other guests about PTSD and things related to this. This is like when the normal everyday stuff that we face as human beings in our relationships with ourselves and others.
Right, exactly. Yeah, PTSD, and that's a very common thing that people experience. Okay, when I would teach it in my classes, I would call it an equal opportunity disorder, because if you have something really traumatic happen to you, first people go through what we call acute stress, meaning or acute anxiety, which means that you're having all of these emotions which are natural and normal because this thing just happened. But then after 3 months' time, okay, these symptoms still continue. That's when it turns into PTSD, and anyone can develop that. What's helpful is getting that support, being able to give your voice to what you've experienced and talk to someone about it.
Mhm.
Okay. Another way too, I want to be sure to share this tool to make feelings smaller, because sometimes our inner kid will get activated, and when you're a little kid, every feeling feels big. Okay.
Sure, it's volcano big. Yeah.
Yeah, whether it's being in a car accident or your parents saying, no, you can't have that bag of gummy bears. Okay. It's still a big thing. So as adults, when we're feeling overwhelmed, when the feelings are feeling too big, okay, this is an exercise you want to do before you get to that point. Okay, so it becomes natural, you become more skilled with it. Is first you mentally take yourself to a situation where you felt a certain feeling. Okay, you can choose the feeling and feel what it feels like in your body, what thoughts, and then once you got a hold of that, then imagine that you're placing it in your two hands in front of you. Okay, you let go of that feeling, you place it in your hands. It's no longer inside you. You put it in your hands. And then you feel what it feels like to not have that feeling inside of you. It's just resting in your hands. It's kind of like a little ball of energy, however you want to visualize it. Okay, whatever makes sense to you. And then you can practice, then take it back into yourself, feel it again for a few moments, and then visualize putting it back out in your hands again. And do that until you can really get comfortable with feeling the feelings and then letting them go.
So I would call that taking a pause.
Taking a pause.
I would call that taking a pause and doing that and kind of putting the brakes on for a little bit. It's a pump the brakes maneuver.
Right. To
So
make
that,
it more manageable.
right. So that you can manage and have that level of control.
Exactly. Which allows more oxygen to get to your brain, reduces cortisol, that stress hormone, okay, and allows you to think more clearly. And then you can start getting back into more of a comfortable space.
So when you feel like you're ready to brake, you have to brake
Right.
like a car.
Exactly.
So chatter versus, pump the brakes, pause a moment. I think that's a real nice, valid technique. And I love the visualization of, and there's a tenderness of having in your hands.
Right.
That's
Right.
there. There's a cradling, tender effect of, I might need this again.
Yeah, because feelings exist for a reason,
Sure.
no matter what feeling we're talking about. They all serve a purpose.
I mean, I'm sure there are going to people, as soon as it comes out of them, it's in their hands, they're going to want to pitch it as far away from them as they possibly can.
That's right. That's right. And there may be some feelings that you feel like you've outgrown. If it's something in the past, you can let go of it. Okay.
So then you can let it go with love. I say give it to the angels.
Right. Yeah. Let it be transmuted into other kinds of energy.
Someone's asking about, they want to know what you would say about the feeling of out of control. If you're feeling out of control, you actually get to that. Would you say that's like the next level beyond this one even? That, we've been kind of incrementally starting kind of soft and then we've been building. Are you ready to go to the crescendo or or is there another level in between we should talk about first?
Well, typically our emotions build up from little to really big. And if we can handle them while they're still little, they're easier. Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Self-awareness, no matter what that level may be, because it could be tiny, it could be medium. You don't want to ignore it until it gets to be really huge. The thing about feelings being huge is that if they're too much for us, nature has a way of taking care of us, and that is we become numb.
Mm.
Okay. In fact, and in my practice, I specialized in working with abuse and trauma survivors. So I had one client who early in her abuse recovery would say, "There's no place like numb." Okay, kind of doing a play on that expression. Okay. And yeah, when feelings get to be too big, we just go into that numb space. Okay. For example, if you've ever lost anyone, if anyone close to you has ever died, and someone came to you and said, "I hate to tell you this, but so and so has passed." At first, you go into numb space. It's like, what? What? And then it starts to sink in gradually. Likewise, getting a really big diagnosis, a very scary diagnosis. First, you go into numb space. That's nature taking care of us. We don't want to live in that numb space. Okay.
It's kind of like shock sets in.
Shock sets in. Yeah. It's a transitional kind of space. Okay. And then nature lets us feel the feelings. They start to come in bit by bit until we can feel the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Even with physical pain, it works that way. Okay. If we have an injury, we don't feel it immediately, but then later we feel it. Okay. A silly example of this that happened to me, I guess it was over 50 years ago. I was getting ready to move, and a bunch of us got into the U-Haul truck cab. Okay. There were 4 of us sitting in a place for 3. So I was sitting on someone's lap since I was the smallest. And I got my hand in the edge of the door with my thumb grasping the door edge. And I'm trying to get situated in on this person's lap when that person suddenly slammed that truck door shut. And so my thumb was caught in the truck door. And I remember sitting there looking at it thinking, my thumb is in the door. How do I tell these people that my thumb is in the door? That was kind of like that numb space where I was seeing what had happened, but I wasn't feeling the pain physically yet. I sure felt it though as soon as they got the door open when the person who was driving said, "Oh, we can't start. Brenda's got her thumb in the door." So yeah, they got me out.
That's your scream the head off moment. Ah!
Oh yeah. After I got out of the cab of the truck, then I'm jumping up and down and screaming.
So we have that numb state, but
yeah, very natural.
Can we lean into in terms of dealing with and coping with that numbness? Are you saying just that we would just wait that out?
Yeah, you wait it out because it is transitional. Mm-hmm. Okay. The only way we get stuck in the feeling space is if we deny it. You know how sometimes people will do what some folks call a John Wayne on their feelings. I don't feel this, I don't feel that. Okay, that just makes you get stuck.
Sure. Okay. I think I remember reading that that's called disassociation. If you get too numb, and that some ways of dealing with that would be to say, okay, I'm going to get myself out of the emotional numbness by I'm going to hold a piece of ice. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look around the room and look at the different colors and start to connect with the space around me. So I think that's a way of dealing with the numbness, the disassociation. There's some techniques in terms of emotional overwhelm that puts you into shutdown mode.
Right. Yeah. People who have been through a long history of trauma and abuse do develop dissociative kinds of ways of coping with things. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there are very useful tools like what you were describing is what we call doing the basics, where you look around the room, you name the colors to yourself, the objects. things like that, to get back to the here and now, the present moment again, which we've talked about on occasion while we've been discussing this.
Sure.
Yeah, getting back into the here and now. And by doing that, you gradually get back into your body too.
Sure. You start to recognize.
Right, yeah, because when we dissociate, we can leave our bodies. Okay, it's like our bodies get numb. We're not aware of the body, or what's around us feels unreal. Okay, there's a disconnect.
Right. It feels like wonky world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, again, we want to reconnect. Okay. Yeah, pushing things away, okay, isn't a healthy thing. Just remember, emotions are energy, okay, and we work with that energy.
So sometimes when people are feeling out of control, they may go into this. It's almost like someone just hit the button real quick and turn the computer off and they go numb. But what if they are really out of control, or they feel that they're out of control? Because I know that's a comment that's on this episode right now. This idea of what do they do when it's escalated to, like, again, the crescendo level, that level of emotional overwhelm. Hopefully they've tried to do those other steps, but maybe it raced on through 0 to 160 seconds kind of thing, and they're at the absolute limit of out of control. What then, Brenda? What then?
Okay. Now, when you say out of control, do you mean with the things that the person is telling themselves, or are they?
I think it's the emotional out of control. When people get to the emotional out of control, I'm assuming that's what the commenter was wanting to send it to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're not trying to overpower the pilot who's flying the plane, or
no, I don't think it's that level of crazy.
Okay.
I don't think it's killer zone, but maybe.
Yeah, as my clinical supervisors used to say when I was a young intern, specific, objective, and behavioral. Like, what does so and so mean when they say out of control?
That's true. Maybe they'll write it and say, what do you mean by the feeling of out of control?
Right. Yeah, and have them be specific and behavioral. But yeah, if you're feeling like the feelings are too big, your most direct path to getting back on top of things is to just work with your breathing. That's the most easily available, kind of like a toe hold. Okay, and with using the tools we've been talking about, okay, the more practiced you get with them, okay, the easier they are to do, so that you never really get to that out of control space. Okay, you start developing kind of like I don't want to say co-consciousness, or although it's kind of like that, where you're always aware of what's going on inside of you as you're dealing with the world around you also. Okay, because we have to be in touch with both.
True.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, when you start feeling yourself starting to react, okay, the more you practice the tools, you'll be able to recognize, okay, I'm holding my breath. What is this about? I'm feeling this pain in my neck. What's going on here? What am I reacting to?
But when they've gotten to the crescendo level and you recognize, oh my gosh, I'm emotionally out of control, there's that sense of I think in that moment, it's almost like you have to say, there's the observer you that says, okay, this is a little much.
Right.
You may need to step back. You may need to go into another room, take a few deep breaths before you say something to a person that's going to escalate whatever's going on more. Always ask yourself, is this going to make it better or worse?
Exactly. Yeah, you want to, and that's where being aware of the situation comes into play too. Recognize when you have to leave the situation and take that break. In fact, I've had a number of clients who, in the work situation, because you can't just go storming out of your workplace and go home or whatever. So that's where the company restroom, for example, comes in. Go into one of those stalls and just sit there, work on your breathing, take a deep breath.
The stall becomes your happy place.
Exactly. Because nobody's going to ask you what you're doing in there.
They better not, right?
Yeah. And if they do, they've got some boundary issues going on.
True.
Okay.
True.
But typically, that's one safe place that people can count on when they're in the work situation. Because when
And
you're in,
sometimes there is emotional spillover,
Mhm.
and maybe you just feel like tears are gonna come dripping down your face,
Right,
or
right.
maybe you feel that you're about to say something that you're going to regret later, or make the situation worse for, or maybe there's a situation where you're just like, I'm kind of at my threshold.
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of just at my threshold of being able to deal with this right now, and you almost have to give yourself a timeout. Like you
Exactly.
said, like get to the get to the restroom stall or somewhere. But I will tell you, being a mom, when my kids were little, it was mom, always knocking on the door. It's There is no safe space, and you
Right.
moms out there know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, when you're a mom at home, yeah. And that's where developing a safe mental space, okay, a happy space comes in. And this gets into visual imagery in your
Sure.
mind, okay, when you're doing your meditation or just some relaxation or whatever. Uh, let come to your mind whatever a happy, safe space is for you, whether it's the beach or the mountains, someplace where you associate relaxation with.
Calgon, take me away.
Exactly, exactly. That's why that commercial was so popular back
It
in the
was so
19.
popular.
Yeah,
That blue water
right.
that
In
you can
fact,
have in
that,
your very own bathtub.
yeah, yeah. In fact, taking a bath, soaking in a hot tub with some Epsom salts and baking soda can be real relaxing too. Helps to relax the muscles.
I
Yes.
noticed I noticed that, if I feel a little bit in that zone, I've noticed I just grab a book that has some spiritual context or words to it. I read a phrase, and all of a sudden it's like, boom.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's like it's a reset. The words reset me. So for some people, it might be the physical need, physical outlet, nature connection with breathing, self,
Yeah.
centering, pulling out those emotions for a little while and taking a pause. And for other people, it might be just reading the right sentence for them. And they just kind of go, yeah, that's right. That's my truth, not this
Exactly.
other.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Good points. Yeah. And also too, music can be helpful
Okay,
because the
yeah, I was
body,
hoping you'd say music.
because the body, can entrain to music, the rhythm, something with a slow beat to help your heart rate and breathing go down some. So that can be helpful. Some people like to watch good-natured comedy programs like the old Carol Burnett show or something like that. That's just kind of lighthearted, good-natured,
Sure.
and gives you a laugh because when we laugh, okay, we work with those muscles that tend to get tense and tight and the breathing also, and we can relieve a lot of stress just from laughing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That laughter really helps, and train music on, especially if you have a drudge task to do and you're like, why am I always the one who has to do this or whatever? You put some
Right.
music on and it changes. It's like you've got a soundtrack for your life and you're bopping along, and it does change some of the emotional overwhelm where you're starting to head down that path.
Mm-hmm. That's
There's a reset with music, or hearing the right words in music or the right beat. And someone's asking, what books do you recommend? What books would you recommend, Brenda, that people
well,
could read?
well, one book that a lot of people have found useful is Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy by David Byrne.
Hmm.
And he's written quite a number of books since then, too. That tends to be a classic. Okay. um, any books dealing with what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, because that has a lot of really good tools in it in terms of working with uh, what your body is doing, what your mind is thinking, to kind of get to that reset moment. Okay. And also working with the emotions in a way that is productive and positive for you.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, but yeah, he's one of the most recent authors. Albert Ellis, he's since passed away recently. He lived up into, I think he was 99 or 98 when he passed. He was one of the founders of cognitive therapy, and he wrote a ton of books for lay people. So I would recommend some of his more later books, we might say. Some of the earlier ones, he was still working things out, needing to debug everything, you might say. Okay. But he's a classic. Marsha Linehan, you could read some of her stuff. Just do a little search for what books she's written. She's also written a number of articles too. She does a number of workshops, not only for professionals, but also for lay people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think David Byrne does too. In fact, I think he even at this point has a whole institute of resources and everything. And all of this stuff is very well supported by the research. We know that this stuff works. It's not just something someone has made up in their mind and they think, oh, gee, I think I'll write a book and get this published. This has been tested, it's tried and true.
And the techniques that you shared, I would say mostly have been tested, right? And approved and over the years of what actually happens. Now, somebody is asking real quickly, what are the best techniques for resolving long-standing Cptsd?
Okay.
It's a little bit beyond our topic for today.
It is. But what you want to do is get a therapist who specializes in PTSD, okay? And also, typically, dissociative disorders can overlap with it, but not necessarily, they're not simultaneously the same, okay? There can be an overlap for some people, okay? But you want to get somebody who is trained and experienced, has a good track record. And the different state psychological associations have free referral services. And you don't have to give them your name or anything. They'll answer the phone and you just say, well, I want a therapist who works with PTSD. Mm-hmm. And they'll ask you if you want a male or a female, what geographic area are you in? And they'll give you 3 names typically. You can call them up, talk to them, see how you feel with each one. Mm-hmm. And if those 3 don't work, you can call your state psychological association up again, okay? And get 3 more. It doesn't cost anything.
And just so people understand clearly, you're saying that if you're going to reach out, there are associations in each state that you can connect with to get referrals for therapists, so that you have a counselor that you can talk things over with, for even if you think it's a little minor emotional thing, to the big stuff too. And so would you suggest that they how would they do the search if they want to Google search for things like that? They just type their state's name in, and then what would they type in after that?
Yeah, the American Psychological Association has what we call state component associations. Okay. For example, New York State has the New York State Psychological Association. Georgia has the Georgia Psychological Association. So
keywords.
That, yeah. And oftentimes they have 800 numbers, okay, that you can call to get referrals. Right. Yeah. And the people seem to be the ones who will be answering the call. Okay, they're very sensitive to human issues, human feelings, very good listeners. And I'm thinking about the time when I had moved up here from Atlanta just a couple of years earlier, and I was needing to get a referral for someone. And so I called, I think this person was in North Carolina. Let me backtrack. Okay, this person was in New York State, but they were in, say, the mid part of New York. And so I called, we call it NISPA, New York State Psychological Association. And I'm saying, okay, I've got this person. I need 3 resources for them. And the woman said, "Are you calling from North Carolina?" And I said, "No, I'm in Western New York." And she says, "Oh, you sound like you're from North Carolina," because
Uh,
I moved up from Atlanta.
right. So she thought you had the Southern twang going on.
Right, right. Yeah, 'cause I had just moved up here from there. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And it's so easy to pick up that twang.
sure. You still have like a little hint,
Hmm.
if we were gonna Henry Higgins you a
Yeah.
bit, you have a little hint of it, but
Yeah, it
not
can
too much
be.
these days. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Not
we've covered a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
emotional overwhelm techniques and how to manage those things. Any last things before we close the show today?
Well, if I were to kind of sum it up in 25 words or less, so to speak, okay. Uh, work with, first off, all feelings are not bad. Emotions are not bad. They just are. Okay. They're kind of like the light on the dashboard of our cars that they communicate things to you. Okay. What matters is what you do with them, what you do with that information. And work with your breathing, have social support, know when to take a break. Okay, look out ways of what we call self-soothing, whether it's the music, working with colors, coloring books, feelings journals, all of those good things. Having good friends to talk to who you trust, who can also be non-judgmental, and don't be judgmental of yourself. Okay, and recognize that fear can be a useful emotion. Okay, recognize when it's reality based and when it isn't, and work with each one accordingly.
Yeah.
Oh, anything else? Yes, always have that inner observer, as you called it. I have a cousin who calls it the angel on the shoulder. Okay,
Nice.
but have that inner observer who's who you're in touch with to be aware of what's going on inside your body, what thoughts you're thinking. Avoid self-talk using words like always, never, should, shouldn't. Okay, that dualistic kind of thinking, either or thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
it
just
happens, and we catch ourselves in those words. But I do feel it's valuable for people to understand how to manage emotional overwhelm for themselves and for others.
mhm,
But we can only start with ourselves. Start with
exactly.
ourselves and build outward. And everybody has their own things that they're dealing with emotionally.
Yeah,
And we have to understand that there's value to those experiences, how we learn to cope with those, how we learn to soothe. It's one of the things as a parent where, as a parent, I'm trying to teach my children how to soothe through the years as they move forward. I want them to have those kinds of coping strategies. And I want the world to have those too, but they have to come to it in their own time. And
mhm,
it may be this may be a show that you need to watch again when something else hits or again. And just take this information for what it's worth in that day, whatever day you're in, whatever emotion you're in, and that you're going to learn and grow and be, and that you're going to feel eventually that when you're in that moment, you go, this too shall pass. And
everything
it's
is temporary.
yes,
Mhm,
it's a
yeah,
recognition of this is just a gauge of where I am at this moment in time. It's not where I'm going to be next week necessarily or next year. So,
right.
so keep that in perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah, perspective is key.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
Well,
more comfortable we get with our own feelings, the more comfortable we'll be with other people's.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you so much again for being on the show today, Dr. Brenda Hawkins.
Thank you, Willa. It's been a pleasure.
Always, always. And you folks, you can stay tuned for next week on Wednesdays with Willa. I have as my special guest Laura Wooster, who is a medium. And I've got other great people lined up. So absolutely, you can like and share and follow on Willow White Medium so you can be alerted to whenever I go live for these wonderful weekly podcasts so that you can learn and grow and educate yourself and perhaps just how share in this beautiful conversation that I have with my guests. And thank you everyone for your kind attention. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Bye.